Hi guys, today we are actually going to be talking about something that is, I know, a little bit old news, but I did want to talk about it because I did miss it last week. If you have not noticed already, if you were watching the video portion of the podcast, you can tell that I did get a little bit of tan. That is because I just came back from Dominican Republic, and there I wanted to film another episode for the show, but I just did not have any stable internet connection to actually upload the video. So I'm going to do it here for you guys today. So if this seems like old news, it's because it is old news, but I did want to cover it nonetheless. Now, without further ado, would you ever think that there would be a time in history that our government would ban gas stoves for personal use or sue at all for that matter? But like we always say, we're not living in the forward-thinking society. We instead are living in a upside-down reality where things that formerly made sense are now illegal, coming soon. Today we are talking about the Biden administration thinking about banning gas stoves, the National Archives Committee finding another batch of classified documents, this time in Joe Biden's garage next to his Chevy. But don't worry, he says his garage was locked. I'm Demetrios Araujo, and you are watching the Demetrios Araujo Show. Without further ado, let's begin, and we do have a big show for you guys, so buckle up.
I got facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past.
Now, starting with the first article, we actually have a update on the Kari Lake situation in Arizona. Now, yes, if you are thinking the same thing as me, this situation is still ongoing. Surprisingly, she's hanging in there like a champ. The Arizona Court of Appeals agreed to expedite consideration of Republican gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake's lawsuit alleging that the 2022 election was flawed. In a brief order issued on January 9th and made public the next day, the court ordered a recess of, quote, the matter of confidence on February 1st, 2023, and agreed with Lake's arguments that her challenge should be handled as a, quote, special action petition. The court date was reportedly scheduled for March. Lawyers for Democrat Arizona Governor Kari Hobbs, the state's former Secretary of State, has until January 17 to respond and argue why Lake's challenge should be rejected. According to the order, Lake had petitioned both the state's appeals court and the state Supreme Court after a Maricopa County judge rejected her case after a 2-day trial in December. But earlier this month, a Supreme Court the Arizona Supreme Court denied Lake's petition to transfer her election lawsuit to the High Court and said it would be heard before the appeals court first. In December, Lake filed a lawsuit against Hobbs in her capacity as Secretary of State, Maricopa County Supervisor, Maricopa Recorder Stephen Richer, and other officials, asserting that the county's handling of the election was seriously flawed and disenfranchised Election Day voters. Lake, a former broadcast journalist, argued that such disenfranchisement and election voting issues were enough to swing the election in her favor. She lost by only 17,000 votes. Now, if you are a normal person with a thinking brain and an IQ above a chicken nugget, you will realize that 17,000 votes is a very, very low number in a state as big as Arizona. Now, if you do look at the info here, you would see that most of the election day voters that were affected by this were Republican, and that came between 25,000 and 40,000 people who would have normally been voting who didn't cast ballots as a result of the tabulator and printer errors. So as you can see, Kari Lake is actually making a really, really good case for her. And if anything, if this is a big question and the margin is very, very low, then how about we just redo the election process in Arizona? We have some questions. You won Katie Hobbs supposedly, and you lost Kari Lake supposedly by a very, very slim margin. So how about we just redo the election because we have questions about it? How is that so hard to realize? Hobbs' first address. In a ceremony earlier this month, Hobbs was sworn in as Arizona governor and on Monday delivered her first speech. And in this speech, she took a stab at Kari Lake, saying that chasing conspiracy theories, pushing agendas for special interests, attacking the rights of your fellow Arizonans, or seeking to further undermine our democracy will lead nowhere, Hobbs said. Other officials who formally took office earlier this month were Adrian Frantes, a Secretary of State, and Chris Myers, who won by only about 280 votes. As Attorney General, both Democrats defended Republicans who subsequently challenged their losses in court, which I would too if I lost by 280 votes. Myers' appointment, GOP candidate Abe Hembrow filed a motion in Mohave County on January 6th to again challenge the election of January 8th results in the Attorney General race and argued that there is new evidence of voter disfranchisement. It came, according to his suit, after hundreds of ballots were located in Pinal County. We simply ask that we have given the opportunity to apply the Pinal County process across the board to conduct a physical inspection and hand count the ballots. That is the Pinal County issue repeats itself anywhere else in the state could be outcome determinative in this election. Himda wrote on Twitter, which I completely agree. We should redo the election in Arizona because we have questions about the election process in Arizona. If we have questions, if people are doubting the election, how about we just redo the election? If this is a big margin, that's a different story entirely. But if it's a small margin by 17,000 votes, or it's a small margin by 280 votes, then redo the election. It's not that hard. And when we redo it, we prove to the people that this election is secure, this election is safe, this election can be trusted, then we don't have to redo the election again. But until there are questions about it, until there are no irregularities or a small minuscule amount of irregularities, then we should redo the election. Unless there is no more, then we can stop redoing the election. But if there is, and there's still interference, because we know for a fact that the United States interferes with elections outside of the United States, so why wouldn't they do it for their special interests within the United States? It just makes no sense. This is according to the left, of course. But moving on to the next segment.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take I got no love.
Okay, moving on to the first article from CNN, we have Russia dangles freedom to prisoners if they fight in Ukraine. Many are taking the deadly gamble. Well, I would too. Promises of freedom and riches are made to convicts in cramped jail cells. Frantic phone calls ensue between relatives and inmates weighing the offer. The prisoners vanish, leaving their loved ones to sift through the reports of their wounded arriving in hospitals. This scene is playing out in the convict communities across Russia, with a regular army stretched thin after nearly 6 months of a disastrously executed and bloody invasion of Ukraine. There is increasing evidence that the Kremlin is making ugly choices in its ugly war in recruiting Russia's prisoners to fight. Over a month-long investigation, CNN has spoken to inmates caught up in Russia's newest recruitment scheme, along with their relatives and friends. Activists believe hundreds have been approached in dozens of prisons across Russia, from murderers to drug offenders. Some have been taken from the prison where one high-profile American jailed in Russia, Paul Whelan, is held. His brother, David, said in a statement in July that he had heard 10 volunteers had left IK-17 in Mordovia for the front lines in Ukraine. Dozens of chat messages between relatives reviewed by CNN detail the tempting rewards offered to fight in Ukraine, where the risk of death is high. The latest Western assignments suggest up to 75,000 Russian troops have been killed or injured since the invasion began, a claim that the Kremlin has denied. One prisoner spoke to CNN from his cramped jail cell, a cat crawling against a bunk beds, and a fan chopped on the top of an aging television tried to cool the air between heavily barred windows. Imprisoned for multiple years for drug offenses, he spoke on the condition of amnesty using a contraband smartphone. Quite common in Russia's prisoner system, the outline of the conditions on offer. They will accept murderers, but not rapists, pedophiles, extremists, or terrorists, he said. Amnesty or a pardon of 6 months is on offer. Somebody talks about 100,000 rubles a month or another 200,000 rubles per month. Everything is different, he said. The offer was made when an unidentified man, believed to be part of a private military contractor's firm, came to the prison in the first half of July, and the apparent acceptance into the program would lead to 2 weeks of training in the Rostov region in southern Russia. While he had 2 years service in the military, he said that the recruiters did not seem to insist on military experience. In my case, if it is real, then I'm all for it, the prisoner said. If it can make a real difference for me, be in prison for nearly a decade or get out in 6 months, if you're lucky. But that's if you're lucky. I just want to go home to my children as soon as possible. If this option is possible, then why not? And I completely agree, why not? The prisoner said 50 inmates had already been selected for recruitment and placed into quarantine in the prison. But he had heard about 400 applied. Rights activists working in the Russian prison system had since the start of July they had been flooded with reports from across Russia from anxious relatives concerned of their fate of their inmates. In the last 3 weeks in July, there were a very big wave of this project to recruit thousands of Russian prisoners and then send them to war, said Vladimir Oskin, head of Galileo.net, a prisoner adversary group. Oskin said some were promised a payout to their families of 5 million rubles, $82,000 if they died. But all the financial rewards might not be honored. There is no guarantee. There is no real contract. It is illegal, he said. Some of the prisoners and their family members appeared keen for the recruitment to go ahead, Oskin said, echoing the responses of some inmate families seen on CNN. Oskin speculated the prisoners were used effectively as bait to attract the 5 of Ukrainian positions and enable the regular Russian military to strike accuracy back. They go first, and when the Ukrainian army sees them, they strike. Then Russian soldiers see where the Ukrainians are and bomb the place. CNN reached out to the Russian Defense Ministry and FSIN for comment on allegations that prisoners are being recruited to fight the Ukraine. Neither responded. While recruitment is in its early days, the first reports have emerged among family members of injured prisoners being hospitalized in the Russian-backed specialist area of Larnarsk. CNN has viewed chat messages exchanged between relatives of inmates and already apparently sent to the front line. One wife details how she contacted her husband, who lay injured on one Lindnesk hospital. The wife said only 3 prisoners from her husband's unit were 10 were still alive. CNN is aware of the identity of the injured prisoner, but has not been able to confirm his hospitalization. His specialist medical facilities are veiled in secrecy. Of course, because they don't want to sit here and say, oh, our prisoners are actually dying in war for us. Because we are so desperate for army men and soldiers that we are actually asking our prisoners to go out and fight for us. That's actually embarrassing for them. Exclusive. United States intelligence materials related to Ukraine, Iran, and United Kingdom found in Biden's private office, source says. I wonder. Among the items of Joe Biden's time as vice president discovered in a private office last fall are 10 classified documents, including United States intelligence memos and briefing materials that covered topics including Ukraine, Iran, and the United Kingdom, according to a source familiar with the matter. Attorney General Merrick Garland has received a preliminary report on the document's inquiry, a law enforcement source said. It now faces the critical decision on how to proceed, including whether to open a full-blown criminal investigation. John Lynch Jr., the United States Attorney in Chicago, has briefed Garland multiple times. No additional briefings are scheduled, but would be conducted if necessary, a source said. The classified documents were dated between 2013 and 2016, according to the source familiar. They were found in 3 or 4 boxes, also containing unclassified papers that fell under the Presidential Records Act. The vast majority of the items in the office contained personal Biden family documents, including materials about bureau Biden family arrangements and condolence letters, the source told CNN. Of course, Joe Biden is going to sit here and leave the classified documents with personal goods and funeral arrangements and condolence letters. So he's sitting here not even caring about where he's putting the classified documents. That's showing that he cares less than Trump did. And he's sitting here leaving it on the side of his Corvette. It just doesn't make any sense. Attorney General Merrick Garland has assigned the United States Attorney in Chicago a handover from the Trump administration to investigate the matter. CNN previously reported Garland made this move after receiving a referral from the National Archives and Records Administration. The documents were discovered on November 2, just 6 days before the midterm elections, of course. And why are we hearing it 2 months after the election? If we're sitting here on November 2, looking at Joe Biden's papers and classified documents next to his Chevy in his garage, owned reportedly for a year under his crackhead son, Hunter Biden, why are we sitting here exposing the facts of this matter now, 2 months after the election, when we found out about this info 6 days before the election? It just does not make any sense. Moving on with the article, the vast majority of the items contain personal. Okay, I already read that. The documents were discovered. Okay, I already read that. The source told CNN that a personal lawyer for Biden was closing out the downtown DC office that Biden used as part of his work with the University of Pennsylvania. The lawyer saw a manila folder that was labeled personal, quote unquote. Opened the envelope and noticed that there were classified documents inside. How did he know they were classified? Were they marked classified? Because that's even worse. The lawyer closed the envelope and called the NARA, the source said. After making contact with the NARA, Biden's team turned over several boxes in the abundance of caution. Of course, because they're so careful. They're so transparent. Oh, even though many of the boxes contain personal materials, the source said. Biden said Tuesday that he did not know that some of classified documents had been taken to his private office after he had left the vice presidency, and that his attorneys did what they should have done by immediately calling the National Archives. Of course, because you don't even know what the hell you're doing. You wake up in the morning and you don't even know. Like, what are you gonna slap somebody in the face? Are you gonna turn to your lovely doctor wife and say, "Oh, Carol Baskin, I love you so much"? No, you don't even know what you're doing in the morning because you just said that you didn't even know what you were even taking home. You're just grabbing a bunch of stuff from your office while you were vice president and saying, "Oh, I like that, I like that, I like that." Putting them in a box and say, "Oh, yep, put it right next to my Corvette inside of my garage." Perfection. United States Attorney had submitted preliminary findings to Garland. Larnage has already completed the initial part of his inquiry and provided his preliminary findings to Garland, a law enforcement source said. That means Garland now must decide how to proceed. Garland was also personally involved in some of the key decision-making related to Trump documents investigation, in the decision to send the FBI to search Mar-a-Lago. But of course, they never sent the FBI or the CIA. They never raided Joe Biden's house in Delaware or his second house in Martha Vineyard, or Obama's house in Martha Vineyard. They don't even care. Nope, they're just going to sit here and say, "Oh, you turned them over? I believe you. Oh, go eat your ice cream now, Joey. You're with your chocolate chip." In the Trump matter, Garland tapped special counsel Jack Smith to take over both the criminal investigation into Trump's post and 2020 election activities and the inquiry into classified documents the former president had taken to his Florida resort. The Biden probe is nowhere near that stage, of course, because he's a Democrat and he has a D next to his name. Garland chose to have Lawrence conduct the Biden documents investigation because he is one of 2 remaining Trump-appointed United States attorneys, and to avoid the appearance of conflict, the interest because he wasn't appointed by Biden, people briefed on the matter said. In addition to Garland, Lawrence had also conducted additional briefings with other Justice Department officials. Of course, at this point, the source said Lawrence is not expected to undertake additional fact gathering. In an awkward moment on Monday, Garland was sitting alongside Biden in a diplomat summit in Mexico while reporters shouted questions about the probe. Both men ignored the questions, of course, because it's not convenient for them. Larnach was also one of the rare Trump-era holdovers who wasn't told to resign after Biden's inauguration in 2021. In Illinois, two Democrat senators supported the decision to keep him at his post, in part because he was handling the politically sensitive investigation of Michael Madeleine, the former Democrat Illinois House Speaker, inducted on corruption charges. And of course, they're going to sit here and try to compare the two. Oh, at least 325 total documents on the Trump side in the CNN fact sheet. And then on the Joe Biden side, 10 total documents. But how do you know? How do you know that he doesn't have more? You don't. So quit it. Moving into the next article, we actually have an MSNBC article. If I could load this up for us now, I would love that. Oh my God, I would love that so much. Okay, Trump and the Biden document scandals are different. That might not matter. Of course it does not matter because they're both it should matter. Joe Biden was merely a president under the time that he took the documents, and Trump was a president while he took the documents. Imagine if we, the citizens of the United States, did that. Oh boy, we would be effed. We would be we would be bent over. That's all I'm saying. This week, we've learned that Joe Biden inappropriately hung onto classified government documents after his time as vice president in the Obama administration. Based on what we know so far, Biden's improperly look significantly less troubling and legally consequential than former President Donald Trump's storage of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. But of course, it's still a political gift from the heavens for Republicans. Of course it is, because of the fact that you guys made it a big deal over the past year when Trump did it. But now when Joe Biden said it and did something exactly like what Trump did, we're going to point our fingers at you. We're going to make little faces at you. We're going to say, we got you because of the fact that we did get you. Or Joe Biden got himself and then decided to run around and chase his tail. That's the thing. You guys would do something to Republicans, and then when the same thing happens, that what happened with Republicans happens to Democrats, then you don't want to take the same exact measures that you did for the Republicans to the Democrats, because that's not in good faith to you and who you support. So you're going to make up any excuses along the line to have your ideas and your ideals of how things should be handled to get them justified. It doesn't make any sense. Rules for thee and not for me. That's exactly how the Democrats think, but sadly, that's not how the world reacts. Trump and GOP lawmakers are already using the news to slam Democrats as hypocrites, and they are eager to point Biden as corrupt in the run-up to 2024. The reality is that it's not going to be easy for Biden to dig his way out of this situation by saying his mishandling documents were less severe than Trump's. Of course, because of the fact that it's not. And we know this is a lie. We know that you are lying out of your face hole, just like all the other mashed potatoes that come running out of your face. Listen, we are not trusting you because you can't lie to the public anymore. Joe Biden, you have the lowest approval ratings in the history of the presidency, first of all. Second of all, you have the least trust of the American public. Okay, I would say in history, but there's a lot of presidents that did not have the people's trust. And you are just looked at as the old guy in town. We don't trust you. So if you were to say that, then nobody cares because we know it's not true. The Biden scandal kicked off on Monday after CBS News first reported the Biden aides had covered the documents with classified markings in November while vacating an office in Washington, D.C. that he used in his capacity as a member of a think tank after he left the Obama administration. Those aides immediately notified the National Archives and returned the documents. After that, Biden's team decided to search Biden's residences to see whether they were in any other mishandled documents. And as of Thursday, we know that another set of documents were found at a second location, a garage storage space at Biden's home in Wellington, Delaware. Biden had said that he was surprised by the discoveries, of course, because he does not remember, like I said, what he had this morning for breakfast. So how would he know what he did when he was vice president? To him, that was like millennia ago. The Biden administration is cooperating with the Justice Department, of course, because they want to look different than Trump, which was notified of the inappropriately kept documents by the National Archives of after the first documents were returned. On Thursday, Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed a special counsel to investigate the matter. Of course, they're just going to keep saying the same stuff. Based on the information that had come out so far, Biden's transgression appears to be considerably less severe than Trump's by a number of measures. Of course, all the measures leading to the one-sided narrative that the media has. Spear. So we're going to be running into the next article we actually have from MSNBC. We actually have Spear pokes grappling holes in Prince Harry's rebrand. Of course. Even before Prince Harry officially published his much-awaited autobiography, Spear, on Tuesday, with just one expert, he had already undermined the narrative he's attempting to build for himself. Among the many details revealed last week, when bookshelves in Spain primarily stocked their shelves, Harry wrote that he feels no shame for having killed 25 Afghans while on 2 tours in the country. His words suggest not the new kind of royal he wants to be seen as, but as a classical idiot. A royal idiot, of course. While the heat and frog on combat, I didn't think of those 25 as people, he writes. You can't kill people if you want them to be as people. They were chess pieces moved around the board, beds taken away before they could kill goods. So horrifyingly in the statement that the Taliban leader Anas Hasquin managed to sound humane in his Twitter response. Mr. Harry, the one you killed were not chess pieces. They were humans. They had families who were waiting for their return. Hopefully, from this autocries will be remembered in the history of humanity. First of all, what case are you trying to make, MSNBC? The case that we should not have any wars at all in the United States? That's just not possible. Moving on to the next article from NPR, we actually have Russia is touting a rare military victory, but Ukraine disputes that claim. Well, of course they will, because that's not in their best interest to do so, obviously. After months of fighting, Russia's defense ministry says its forces captured the eastern Ukrainian town of Soledar, a claim that Ukrainian military officials denied and that prompted bitter infighting with a pro-Kremlin mercenary group involved in the offense. If taken, the salt mining town would be a rare recent military victory for Russia in the war in Ukraine. And now, in its 11th month, in a press briefing, Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konstantinov, and I'm butchering that, said Russian forces had liberated, quote-unquote, Soledar overnight, and insisted the victory carried, quote, important significance for Russia's push to capture the wider Donetsk region. A spokesperson for the Ukrainian military, Skodar Solidarity, scoffed at that assessment, saying that Russian statements do not correspond to reality. Battles are going on in Soledar. Indeed, amid days of intense fighting, there had been some conflicting statements on who controlled Soledar, even amongst the Russian side. The founder of the Russian mercenary force, the Rager Group, claimed his fighters had single-handedly seized the town as early as Tuesday. Yet, in its initial statement claiming victory, Russia's defense ministry notably made no mention of Rangers' contributions. The latest sign of political infighting between Prigozhin and the ministry's top brass that has escalated in recent months. The capture of Soledar was possible thanks to the constant firepower against our opponent by the ground and air forces, as well as rocket and archery groups of the Russian armed forces, said the mercenary spokesperson Konskiv. They constantly launched targeted strikes on Ukrainian positions in the city, preventing Ukraine from sending in reservoirs and missionaries, as well as attempts to withdraw to other areas of defense. The statement prompted an angry outburst by Prigozhin the leading nationalist bloggers who accused the defense ministry of trying to unwarp Wager's victory. The ministry later issued a separate statement to its social media account, crediting the courageous and selfless action in seizing portions of Soledar, unlikely to sift Moscow's fortunes in the war. So the thing is that Soledar is very, very far from Kyiv, which is the capital of Ukraine. So if they want to capture all of Ukraine, they have a lot more to do. Just saying. Moving on to the next article from NPR, we actually have at least 9 people were killed as a giant storm hit the southern United States. Now, this article is really annoying, and you'll see why. Rescuers raced Friday to find any survivors trapped in debris after tornadoes barreled across parts of the South in a system that killed at least 9 people in Alabama and Georgia and inflicted heavy damage on Selma, a flashpoint of the civil rights movement. A better picture of this damage was executed to emerge later in the day as authorities surveyed the scared landscape. At least 35 possible tornado touchdowns were reported across several states, according to the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The National Weather Service, which was working to confirm the twisters, said suspended tornado damage was reported in at least 14 counties in Alabama and 5 in Georgia. Tens of thousands of homes and businesses were without power in both states, according to PowerOutage.us, which tracks outages nationwide. One tornado cut a 20-mile path across 2 rural Alabama communities Thursday before the worst of the weather moved across Georgia on the track south of Atlanta. Researchers in Augusta County found a body after daybreak near a home that had been badly damaged, authorities said. That death brought the toll to 7 in the county, about 40 miles southeast of Selma. At least 12 people were injured severely enough to be taken to the hospitals. Ernie Baggett, Agar County's emergency management director, said as crews cut through drowned cities looking for survivors. He said about 40 homes were destroyed or seriously damaged, including several mobile homes that were launched into the air, which is absurd to see. Imagine you're just living in your home, and all of a sudden your home is put up in the air and then spun all around and thrown to your high school. That's just an absurd thing to think about. They weren't just blown over, he said. They were blown a disaster. They weren't just blown over, they were blown a distance, he said. In Selma, a city etched in the history of the civil rights movement, the city council met on a sidewalk using lights from cell phones and declared a state of emergency, which is, we're going back in time over here. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp said Friday that a State Department of Transportation worker was killed while responding to storm damage, which is crazy. Imagine risking your life to save other people and then you lose your life. He gave no further details. Another death occurred in central Georgia's Butts County, where a passenger died when a tree fell on his vehicle. The coroner said. The storm appeared to have knocked a freight train off its tracks in the same county, officials said. This tornado is crazy. It's just throwing stuff around. It's having a temper tantrum. The storm struck Griffin, Georgia, south of Atlanta, as mourners gathered for a wake at Patterson's funeral home. About 20 people scrambled for a shelter in a restroom and an office in a restroom in the office, while a loud boom sounded as a loud tree fell on the building. When we came out, we were in total shock, said Shamika Peterson-Smith, the funeral home chief operational officer. We heard everything, but we didn't know how bad it actually was. The uprooted tree crashed straight through the front of the building, she said, destroying a viewing room, a lounge, and a front office, but no one was hurt. Thank God. Officials in Griffin told local news outlets that multiple people had been trapped inside an apartment complex after trees fell on it. A Hobby Lobby store lost part of its roof, and firefighters cut loose a man that had been pinned for hours under a tree that fell on his house, which is just crazy to think about. The tornado that hit Selma cut a wide path through the downtown area where brick buildings collapsed. Oak trees were uprooted, cars were tossed on its sides, and power lines were left dangling. Fumes of thick black smoke from a fire rose over the city. It wasn't clear whether the storm caused the blaze. Selma Mayor James Perkins said no fatalities were reported, but several people were seriously injured. Officials hoped to get an aerial view of the city Friday morning. We had a lot of downed power lines, he said. There's a lot of damage on the streets. Maddie Moore was among Selma residents who picked up boxed meals offered by a charity downtown. Thank God that we are here. It's like something you see on TV, Moore said of the destruction. A city of about 18,000 people, Selma is about 50 miles west of Monterey, the Alabama capital. It was a flashpoint of the civil rights movement where state troopers variously attacked black people who marched nonviolently for voting rights across Edmund Pettus Bridge on March 7, 1965. Marcia McVeigh took video of the giant twister, which turned black as it swept away home after home. It would hit a house, and black smoke would swirl up. She said it was very terrifying. 3 factors: a natural La Nina weather cycle, warming of the Gulf of Mexico likely related to, you guessed it, climate change. Okay, so this is just so stupid. NPR, you write this whole entire article, and for a moment I was like, okay, yeah, NPR, you're actually doing so good. You're explaining everything, and then you just go and ruin it. Listen, the South, especially Alabama, especially Texas, especially the South in general, even Oklahoma, they're always hit by tornadoes every single year. Tell me a year that they were not hit by a tornado. It's called Tornado Alley for a reason. If you live in Tornado Alley, it's Tornado Alley for a reason. Now, how do you know for a fact that this did not happen in the past? If we continue, normally the air in the southeast is fairly dry by this time of the year, but the dew point was twice the normal level. Okay, so once a year, once in a blue moon, this occurs. And now you're going to say that it is a ongoing climate change? So if this dew point is twice the level, right, and you're saying that it's hotter there than it was a couple years ago, right? What if it snows 5 feet in New Hampshire? It snows twice the amount that it usually does in New Hampshire. Are we going to say that there's an emergency, that the earth is cooling, that we're going to turn into a giant ice block? No, we're not. We're going to say no. This is not normal weather. This is a once in a blue moon experience, and we'll get over it by next year. It's very, very sad that these people lost their house, but it's not to blame the weather or the climate change for this disaster. No, this is something that's going to happen regardless. Moving into the next article, we actually have a Fox News article. We have Florida homeowners forced to clean up boat from Cuba that migrants abandoned on their property. Imagine this. Imagine you coming home, right, and you're forced to clean up something that you didn't even leave, and now you have to pay money. That's what's happening in Florida. A local Florida news station interviewed a couple that they said that they were forced to pay to have a Cuban boat removed from their property or risk a felony. Why? One Florida homeowner, Jack Bartkus, explained that he was left to deal with the seacraft after about 20 people that rode on this boat from Cuba, and the government took the people into custody, but they didn't do anything with the boat. They left it there and they discarded it, Bartkus said. So it became my problem. It's unfair, totally unfair, he said. Bartkus also told Miami news channel WSVN that he was forced to pay to, quote, clean and sterilize the boat, a process that cost him at least $2,500. There's diesel fuel in there, he said. You can't have an oil spill and have this thing floating out in the water. It's unsafe for other people. Key Colony beach officials told local residents in a letter that migrant boats were their problem, not the government's. If any vessel ends up on your property, it becomes your problem. The rule of the law is both inconvenient and a bit expensive, but it's the law. It doesn't matter if it's the law. I will sue you. If you make me pay something that is not my fault, the state, then I'm suing you. A pothole, I'm suing you. I pay taxes for a reason, so you can get my back when it comes to things that you're supposed to do. You want to take in all these immigrants, you're going to pay for it. The federal government. I know that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis does not want to take in these immigrants, so he will be more than happy to reject these people, but the federal government, it has the right over these beaches. So if it comes up on the beach, then it's the federal government's fault, not the state's fault. Moving on to the next article, we actually have Lori Lightfoot torpedoed over re-election campaign. Worst mayor in America. Of course, Lori Lightfoot is the worst mayor in America. I mean, it's sad that they're figuring this out now. I mean, Lori Lightfoot has been a bad governor as soon as she was elected in there. But I guess better to find out late than ever. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot re-election was ridiculed by critics Thursday at her as her campaign touted her record on crime and sought to help of students volunteers in exchange for school credit. Fox News' Craig Gutfield put Lightfoot on blast, arguing on The Five that she is not fighting for crime, she's fighting for power. Lightfoot announced that she would seek re-election as the Windy City's mayor in June 2022. Crime has spiked roughly 40% since she took office in 2019, and homicides rose to their highest numbers in 25 years in 2021. Gutfield said other people's suffering only comes across Lightfoot's radar when it's politically a threat. It does show the difference between Democrats and Republicans, he argued. Republicans tend to confront their problem children, be it George Soros or somebody else. The Dems just elect them, to be a historical first. He continued arguing Lightfoot is a historical first.
I got facts.
He continued arguing Lightfoot is a historical first, but not in the way that she seems to be remembered. She's the first mayor to be under the thumb of the cartels. She's the worst mayor in America, the worst mayor Chicago has ever had, Gutfield said. She looks like she hasn't slept since 1983. No, I can do you one better. She has not slept since the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th, 1776. So that's just how long she has not slept. I mean, they just keep going after her. She has not slept ever. You think that she has not slept since 1983? No, she has not slept since 1776, America's founding. She dresses like she planted the Salvation Army bell ringer. Yeah, she really does. It's so funny. Keep going at her. Why don't Democrats call her out on her record? Why don't they say anything? It's because they're cowards. And two, she's protected by her diversity shield, right? A black lesbian left-winger, Gutfield said. So they're willing to let the city just burn to the ground. A 40% increase in murder. No white guy would get away with that. Of course, no white guy would get away with that because of the fact. No, actually, maybe one white guy would get away with that, and that's Joe Biden. You have to be dementia-ridden, though. That's the only thing. Moving on to the next article for Breitbart, we have far-left President Boric faces backlash after pardoning violent rioters. Of course, Chile is just very, very bad right now. Chile's far-left president, Gabriel Boric, is facing a lawsuit by lawmakers this week in response to his decision in December to pardon a former Marxist guerrilla member and several others imprisoned but for participating in the leftist riots between 2018 and 2021. The presidential pardon sparked a new crisis for the largely unpopular president and his cabinet. Chilean opposition lawmakers filed a lawsuit before the nation's courts on Wednesday against Marcia Rios, who recently resigned from her position as Minister of Justice to contest the pardons. Boric pardoned a group of 13 Chilean men on December 30th. 12 of them, aged between 21 to 38, had been involved in the movement of violent leftist assaults that intentionally claimed to have begun as protests against public transit fare hikes in 2019. The public resulted in multiple incidents of leftist riots, burning churches and historical sites, destroying train stations, and attacking police. The riots left more than 30 dead. So they're protesting transit fare hikes in 2019. So why are they burning down police stations and churches and historical sites? Why? The 13th man pardoned by Boric was 48 years old, George Marco Madila Vergez, a former member of the Marxist-Leninist Manuel Virginius Patriotic Front (FPRMR) terrorist organization. Madila had been sentenced to 16 years in prison for his participation in a bank robbery in 2013. It is a difficult decision, but I do it thinking about the good of the country. I believe that we have to heal these wounds. Here we lived in progress that was tremendously complex, where these are young people who are not delinquents. Boric said, asserting that the pardons were a personal commitment, that they are complex decisions, but I assumed them responsibly. Boric followed up his pardon with a stem condemnation this week of a riot in Brasilia, Brazil, by unarmed supporters of former conservative President Jair Bolsonaro that destroyed historical artifacts in the country's congressional, presidential, and Supreme Court headquarters, but reportedly did not involve any armed persons and resulted in no deaths. The Chilean leftist attackers took advantage of the nationwide outage in response to a proposed public transit fare hike to ultimately demand a complete replacement of the nation's constitution. Boric, elected after the protests, followed through on the process of drafting a new constitution via a congressional convention process. The proposed new constitution was overwhelmingly rejected through the referendum held in September 2022. Throughout 2022, the Chilean Senate worked on a project to grant amnesty to qualifying people arrested during the violent wave of leftist riots. The project had been originally scheduled for a vote on August 17, but one day before it was put up to vote, Chilean senators expressed that the project faced an uncertain future due to a lack of required support to continue materializing it. Boric's decision to grant pardons to people involved in the leftist riots contradicts his own statements during his presidential campaign. In November 2021, right after he had won the first round of the presidential election, and 1 month before his presidential runoff election victory, Boric had explicitly stated, quote, "I believe that a person who burned down a church, a small and medium-sized enterprises, or looted a supermarket cannot be pardoned. But if you burn down a large-sized enterprise, you're good?" What? Why are you so specific? This is what he should say. "I believe that a person who burned down any building at all cannot be pardoned. People convicted of arson, looting, serious crimes, from my point of view, it is not acceptable to think of a pardon for everyone," he added. One of these 12 men pardoned was Felipe Santina, a 22-year-old Chilean man who had been sentenced to 7 years in prison for attempting to burn a cathedral located in the city. Another of those pardoned was Boric was 34 years old. By Boric was 34-year-old Luis Costello, who prior to his participation in the leftist riots and looting in 2018 had been convicted of crimes on 5 different occasions between 2005 and 2017. Camila Vagello, communist politician and Chile's current Minister General Surgeon of Government, acknowledged in a press conference held on Sunday that the Chilean government did not comply with the criteria of excluding those with complex records from pardons, while assuring that if the president had had all the elements in the view, the situation would have been different. The controversial pardons sent out by a ripple of reactions and backlash against the far-left president, made worse by Virgil's statements, and have so far caused the resignation of 2 Boric cabinet members in the first days of January. Marzia Lopanza, Boric's chief of cabinet, and Marcela Rios, who served as justice minister. She served as justice. The president is morally responsible for everything that those pardoned do from now on, Solios said, while adding that if Castillo kills a person in 6 months, blood will flow through the hands of the president of the republic. And I completely agree with this. I completely agree that if you pardon somebody and then they do a really, really bad crime in the future, you're the one that pardoned him. He would have been in jail. So the blood is in your hands. You should not pardon people if it's something stupid like this. You just burn down buildings. No, you're going to go to jail as long as we possibly can put you there. But that's going to be it for today's show. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for enjoying. And if you did enjoy this podcast, please subscribe down below because I do post every single Tuesday and every single Thursday. But we do have an announcement coming up soon. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.